The bullying began when I was about 8 years old, and it actually started with a girl who was in the year above me. She used to call me names and the teachers classed it as gentle bullying. It got dealt with, but it never really went away until she moved on to high school. And then in year 4 we had a new boy start, and he began calling me names too. And it got worse when we moved on to high school because we were placed in the same form together, and then over time he managed to persuade the rest of the boys in my form to bully me too. I would constantly be crying at my mum and dad in the mornings, telling them that I felt sick in order to try and stay at home, and when I did get sent in I would be telling the teachers that I felt ill in the hope that they would send me to the nurse and I would get sent home. Whilst we were waiting for a certain class, I remember the main bully having those sweet necklace things with the little beads on, and he would bite them in half and use the elastic to flick them at the back of my head, and I remember how painful that was. Even though they're tiny little sweets, they were so hard and it really hurt. My mum was constantly on the phone every evening to the school telling them what had happened, and then my parents would be called into meetings with my head of year, and his mum would be called into meetings too. On several occasions my parents and I got the excuse that he was from a broken home, which at the time I didn't really understand, but now it really upsets me that the school made an excuse for him even though he was doing this to me, and I don't think that that's an acceptable thing to do. One day he took my bag and put a tuna sandwich inside of it and then squished it, so it just went everywhere, and I was so upset because not only did my bag stink, but it went all over my history book and I had to get a new bag. But I remember being so devastated because history was one of my favourite subjects at the time, and my book was completely ruined. A learning support assistant actually took me up to her office and helped me clean up my bag and made sure I was okay. And it's the first sort of time that I really remember any teacher giving me any sympathy over what had happened. I spent most days listening to the bullies calling me names and swearing at me, and I even once got spat on by one of the boys. Luckily it landed on my umbrella and not on me, but I remember still being mortified. I used to come home and spend about half an hour to an hour of a night just crying in my room to one of my parents, and looking back on it now I feel so guilty for using so much of their time when I had younger siblings that they could have also been giving their attention to, but instead they were in my room listening to me practically suicidal, asking them why they'd had me, and telling them that I wished I was dead, and even asking them to kill me at 11 years old. I actually got to the stage where I began considering suicide. I was 11. I would go sit at the top of the stairs in the middle of the night and just stare at the kitchen door, thinking I could go down and slit my wrists and it would all be over. And then I used to sit by my window and considering jumping, hoping that the impact would kill me. I always had the one thing though that stopped me, and that was the thought of my family. My parents finding me in the morning dead, or my siblings having to live with the thought that their sister killed herself and having to live with that and deal with that for the rest of their lives, and I just couldn't do it to them. I had a text on my old phone from my mum saying going to ring the teachers straight away, and I remember that day because I was at school hiding because the bullying was really bad and just being petrified and so scared that I ended up texting my mum. Having our seating arrangements in alphabetical order normally meant that I was either sitting next to one of the bullies or had the rest of them behind me, and I was normally at the front as well, so I was petrified. I used to make up excuses, and I remember one day I told the teacher that I had a headache in order to leave the class and get sent down to the nurse's office, and before I was allowed to go, my nurse had a chat with my mum, and she was explaining my poor attendance record to my mum, in which my mum replied about the bullying and how nothing was being done to help me. If the bully did anything particularly badly, he got suspended for a couple of days, which means that he literally got to have a couple of days off school for bullying me. He turned around to the teachers one day because he got suspended literally like 2 or 3 days before half term, and he turned around to the teachers and said, "Yes, I get to spend more time on my Xbox," which, looking back at it now, really makes me angry because he was being praised for bullying me. He was given time off to play video games instead of being forced into school to do and education, and it really annoyed me. I also got sent to the Quest Centre one day, which is the room where they send the special needs children who need extra learning support. And I didn't get given any work. I missed my English lesson, which was one of my favourite lessons, and I was made to literally sit at a table and stare at a blank wall for 2 hours. Nobody spoke to me and nobody gave me any work. At the time I didn't really have a proper phone either, like it didn't have proper games on it and I didn't really know how to work it. So I literally sat and did nothing for 2 hours, and I feel awful because in a way I was being punished for what I was having to go through. I was made to sit in this room like I was being punished, and I missed a lesson at school, and I don't think that was fair.